Morning, bro, and happy Independence Day.
Morning, Gopal. How are you? Happy Independence Day to you as well.
Thanks, bro. What a day to have this conversation, right? We are celebrating our 79th Independence Day today. At the same time, the whole dynamics across these many years has definitely changed between Britain and India. It's brilliant how things have evolved.
I completely agree, Gopal. I think, on the 79th Independence Day of India, from British rule, the deal we're going to talk about really brings the two countries closer than ever. And certainly I'm excited about what this means for both countries, bringing us closer as partners again.
I think that makes perfect sense, bro. And another thing that excites me about this deal is it somehow marks a different type of independence. While I think over these many years, both the countries have had their challenges, have grown in their own ways. I think it kind of gives us an opportunity, this particular deal, to for companies on both sides of the table to actually get more independent in what their ambitions are and try to kind of charter new areas of growth.
Absolutely, Gopal. I mean, look, we've read and heard a lot in the press recently about, the UK doing free trade agreements with a lot of countries. When you actually delve into the detail of those free trade agreements, you'll find they're actually not that free. There's still a lot of red tape attached to them. Whereas when you look at the deal between India and UK, this is what a good free trade deal looks like or agreement looks like for businesses on both sides, with so much red tape being removed and significant financial benefits and opportunities for businesses on both sides. So yeah, great time to be talking about this, Gopal.
I think it makes perfect sense. But it's funny because free is the first F when it comes to free trade agreement. But anyways, bro, I've been really diving deep into this UK-India trade deal. Now I know this has been all kind of going on for a while, the conversations, and it got finally agreed earlier this year, and very recently we got it signed. And honestly, the more I read into it, the more I think this could be a real game changer for organizations.
Yeah, no, I agree, Gopal. And I think, for me, what struck me most was how long it took to get this deal done. I think it took something like 3 years and 15 rounds of negotiations between both parties. I think this tells you that the sides really wanted to get this right rather than rush into something superficial. So, it's taken its time, but I think the end result has really been worth it. Look, we're still at the beginning of it. We people are still really getting to understand what the deal means. So as we understand more, I am sure we'll find out that this is really what a free trade agreement should be like, and I'm sure it will be used as a almost a blueprint for other free trade agreements with other countries and countries across the world.
No, you're absolutely right. And while one would call the last 3 years as negotiations towards this particular deal, we definitely can't forget the previous deals that were on the table, and this
Mm.
builds positively on a lot of them. We can't not see the ways and the manner in which a lot of businesses have changed. The cost of living has definitely increased on both sides of the table. I think things like Brexit, things like COVID have had their own impact. And I think the world is getting more uncertain from that point of view. But if you look into what has actually been achieved, it's pretty comprehensive. And we're not just talking about the usual tariff reductions. Now, we could have hours and hours of new podcasts on what tariff implications are happening around the world for multiple reasons. But then, if we just look at this particular deal, it feels like most of the goods within the next 10 years or so are going to be mostly tariff free.
Yeah.
And what really excites me is the service component around it, because in today's world, I cannot see the servitization as something which can be forgotten about when it comes to managing a product supply chain.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, we can talk about the obvious benefits, the tariff reduction benefits on both sides. I mean, within the next 10 years, tariffs on 99% of exports from India to the UK will disappear. Currently they are significant. And within the same time period and starting immediately, tariffs on British imports to India are also reducing, things like Scotch whiskey, which is going to, we know there's a demand for not strictly, but British food and products as well in the UK. It really does open up the markets to companies on both sides of the deal. But I think, the UK government were are calling this best deal India has ever agreed in terms of service access, and that absolutely is true. You and I know, and others know that India has been notoriously protective of their services sector. So having for the UK financial services and professional firms to get this level of market access to the Indian services sector is absolutely huge and game changer. Something that we couldn't possibly even think about 3 or 4 years ago, but that is very much a reality now for businesses on this side of the pond.
I agree, bro. And I think if I kind of just revisit some of the things that both of us have been close to. Now I know we have worked together on quite a few
Mm.
engagements, looking at some of the global supply chains, and when you kind of build upon your experience, 25 years, I believe, or more probably, in some of the across your consumer goods and retail supply chains. Some of the fortunate experience I have had around building certain global supply chains. I think it's brilliant what the world is kind of getting to with deals like these, and especially this particular deal. And if I just take a step back and look at the numbers which are kind of backing this deal up, well, just looking at the projections, I think they are projecting around 25.5 billion of annual increase in bilateral trade in British pounds. We are looking at a 4.8 billion pounds boost to UK GDP, which definitely is something which is very, very much needed for, and people in UK would definitely agree to that. It's already very substantial, the current trade agreement which is on the table, and adding to it that the UK exports to India last year were around 13.5 billion pounds. Imports were about 10.4 billion pounds. I think we are heading to something really special here.
Yeah, Gopal, look again, just to think about a few of the numbers, what this means for British businesses. India currently is the fourth largest economy in the globe. It overtook the UK a year or two ago, and it's forecast to overtake Germany in the next couple of years. Okay. It's the largest population on the planet of 1.4 billion, but most importantly, it's got 400 million middle class families in that country. That's 400 million people that British businesses can count as customers now going future. Compare that to the population of the UK, 60 million. You're talking 7, 8 times the potential opportunity in India. And India is a young country. The median age of the population in India, Gopal, is only 29. So, whereas if you compare it to the UK, we do have an aging population, but and the market in India is just absolutely huge. I mean, another staggering fact that I came across was in the next decade, India will account or contribute towards 20% of the total global growth. That's 20% of global growth from one country, Gopal. So, for us on this side, as British businesses to get access to that market, it's huge and not something we can sit here and ignore, and we absolutely need to take advantage of.
I think another thing which kind of comes into play is when we talk about some of the largest economies of this world,
Mm.
we definitely speak of China, and rightly
Yeah.
so. I think what they have achieved over the last few decades have been amazing, just absolutely amazing. We talk about Indonesia, again, a very, very strong growth platform over there. We have got the Bangladesh manufacturing around textile and stuff, which is definitely taking over the world. We've got Brazil. But then when we talk about India and UK in this particular perspective, you've got two countries which do share an element of cultural alignment. We do share the language, which definitely makes it easier to work with. And I think while inherently I know the dynamics have been very different depending upon what kind of questions you're asking. But then it does give me a much more confident kind of outlook around a large population from India coming closer to how a
Mm.
UK supply chain could grow. And I think that definitely makes it really, really exciting for me. Also, what kind of is really interesting for me is this particular deal is not just in isolation. We know from our work around the various programs that we have worked on that you could have a deal, you could have an agreement, but what about the ecosystem that they're working in? And if I just pick the technology security initiative, like which got launched, I think it was last July, I believe, and it already started laying the groundwork for a much deeper collaboration in things like AI, cybersecurity, emerging tech. All of them have, well, it depends upon how you look at it, but they would be seen as opportunities and threats when it comes to global supply chain. And it just feels like they are all building an integrated economic partnership and not just a trade deal when you look at the whole
Yeah.
thing together.
Yeah, Gopal, exactly my thinking. I think this goes much deeper than a superficial trade deal. And if you look at, British businesses that are moving on with this, Tesco partnering with Tata, M&S doing the joint venture with Reliance Retail, Holland and Barry expanding through Apollo into the Indian market. These aren't just sourcing arrangements where UK businesses are just sourcing from India. I've sourced from India for over 20 years. I've sourced extensively across different sectors from India. I've sourced opened a sourcing office in New Delhi about 2 decades ago. The landscape's really moved on. These arrangements that we are not now seeing between British businesses and Indian businesses or the Indian economy, these are strategic partnerships, Gopal. And it recognizes India as both a manufacturing partner, but also as a growth market for British businesses to sell their products and services to. So absolutely.
And if and it's brilliant because if I take the same
Mm.
perspective and build upon it, and just think about one of the recent programs we worked on together, the toy manufacturer
Yeah.
selling in UK, it was quite interesting the way they are looking at India as a strategic manufacturing hub and not just a low cost sourcing kind of entity. There were days, and still, I'm sure there are supply chains where they look for opportunities to get a low sourcing model in place. But the way some of the companies are now looking at the whole operations within India as a strategic move, I think that is really interesting. If I remember correctly from some of the conversations with the COO of that particular business, she did mention that they see the location and the positioning and the operations within India as something how China was evolving a couple of decades ago. And definitely a lot goes around it to see how the infrastructure, how the logistics, how other opportunities are being set in. But it was quite exciting to see that they were looking at the similar perspective and they are looking at similar kind of opportunities as you go through. And I think over years, I know we were having conversations about 6, 7 years ago about kind of can we help companies diversify their portfolio when it comes to supplier and what would be the ideal global sourcing model when we were working with a couple of retailers at that point with the
Yeah.
previous employer. And I think that diversification, while the intent had already been, that was always there, I think the companies have now started to take those steps further on. They're no more baby steps. They are actually long strides that they're taking. And deal like these definitely should help in making companies make that particular move.
Yeah, Gopal, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. You and I were both involved in the conversations our client was having with the supplier partners in India recently, and we experienced firsthand how, they are actually moving business away from the Far East regions, China, Vietnam, and in India, because, the facilities that are available in India now, the technology, and just the general attitude of the way people want to do business in India has changed massively in in the last 5, 10 years compared to how it was 15, 20 years ago. I mean, if you look at someone like Apple, I think, I read somewhere again that majority, I think, or over 90% of the iPhones sold in the US now are being manufactured in India, not China. So, there is that capability. And I certainly know in, talking about our client we've been working with for the last few months, they also supply some of the customers, the manufacturers in India that our clients dealing with. They're supplying some of the biggest names in the planet, like the Hasbro's and the Mattels of the world. So again, you've got really big businesses across the world who are now placing business and doing business within India confidently and almost moving some of their businesses away from the traditional sourcing zones like China, Vietnam, Indonesia, and looking at India in a new light.